Zelos has released a new Thresher GMT, this one dubbed the Zelos Thresher Worldtimer. I reviewed the original Thresher back in 2020, and this one is a much different watch than its predecessor. There are 6 different versions of the Worldtimer, 5 of them being titanium, all with different dial colors or materials, and then there is this one, the all Damascus case with a new fitted rubber strap. Beyond the case material changes, these watches are now 41 millimeters, down a little from the original 42, and all of them have the LumiCast solid lume block numbers, and they are now equipped with the Miyota 97.5 True GMT movement. This Damascus edition takes things a bit further with a lumed carbon dial. Yes, the dial is marbled carbon fiber that has lume mixed in with it, which just looks crazy cool in the dark. These watches are set to drop today, and the launch pricing will be good for about a month or so, I believe. And pricing is $849 for this Damascus version, $629 for the standard titanium, and $649 for the aventurine or mother of pearl dial options. There's a lot to talk about here with this one, so let's get to it. All right, where to start with this one is, like I said, there is a lot to talk about with this watch, especially a Damascus version. But let's go ahead and get into the differences with this one and the titanium model. Now, I don't have the titanium model in hand, nor have I seen one, but I will discuss them here briefly. The titanium models have solid titanium cases and bracelets, a new bracelet design compared to the original Thresher as well, and they're hard-coated with the 1200 Vickers hard coating most brands are using nowadays. They all have sapphire covered world time inserts and are using the same 97.5 GMT movement. As I said, different colors and dial options are available. But that brings us to this Damascus Steel edition. Now, I'll put up all the specifications on screen, but yes, this is an all Damascus case, bezel, crown, and strap buckle. The dial is marbled carbon fiber with lume mixed in, and compared to the titanium versions, even with all the different materials going on, this one is kind of subdued in terms of look and colors, at least until you turn the lights off. So let's start with the Damascus Steel. This is the first time I have had a Damascus Steel watch in hand, and it's important to know a few things. This is not real Damascus steel, or what used to be known as Wootz steel, as that has been lost to history. It's also not the same that would be used in swords or knives, as that tends to have a high carbon content. This one is done with pattern welding and creates a beautiful pattern, as you can see. This, to my eye, looks better than some other Damascus steel cases I have seen, like from H2O, and on par with a few others. Keep in mind, this is not a coating, but the pattern goes through the steel. Now, the one thing I kept wondering about is durability, and I really wasn't able to find an answer online for this. Now, I did not have this watch in hand long enough to really test its durability and what happens if you get a big scratch from a drop. But I will say, through wearing it a few times and with doing photography and video, I didn't find any scratches on the case or bezel. Now, there may be very minor micro scratches I just can't see with my eye, but it's held up really well. I just can't comment on how it will hold up to drops and normal wear and tear over time. If you have a watch that is made of Damascus steel like this, let me know down in the comments how it's held up. The case design is somewhat similar to the original model, but there are quite a few changes besides being 1 millimeter smaller in diameter. It's 3 millimeters shorter than the original model, and the big difference to my eye is the thickness. The original was over 15 millimeters thick. This one is only 11.5 millimeters without the crystal. As you can see, that mid case is pretty thin. And even with the thick top hat style crystal, it's only 12.7 millimeters thick. The crown has also been moved to the 4 o'clock position. The bezel is completely different, not just with the Worldtimer insert, but it's a completely different bezel altogether. The dial is also completely different and retains nothing of the original. So while this does carry the Thresher name, it's not the same watch with a new movement. This is a completely new watch altogether. And we talked about that Damascus steel, but I really didn't talk about how it looks. And I have to say, this is a really beautiful Damascus pattern on the case, and it kind of has that dull titanium look about it. So even though it's kind of fancy with the pattern, it's not exactly noticeable or flashy, if you will. If you are someone that doesn't like to draw a lot of attention to yourself and was worried this would be too much, it really isn't. On the wrist, unless people got up close, they probably would not think it was that much different than any other steel or titanium watch. Now, that could be a negative for some folks as well, who are hoping for something really eye-catching and flashy that stands out. So let's talk function. This is a Miyota 97.5 GMT. I just reviewed one with the RZE Fortitude GMT, and I have reviewed a lot of watches with this movement over the past year or so. Yes, it has the independent or jumping hour hand to set your designation time, a Blue Arrow GMT hand, and this one has a WorldTimer bezel, a 48-click bidirectional bezel. Now, you can use the bezel in conjunction with the GMT, or you can just use the GMT separately. And for me, I have to be honest, I've never cared for the WorldTimer bezel complication, but in fairness, I'm not traveling much out of time zone, and I don't have a need for it. But beyond that, I feel for this particular model, the Damascus model, I would rather have a GMT 24-hour bezel, as the blue on black small GMT chapter ring just doesn't have enough contrast or readability to me. The GMT chapter ring is small, and that means the numbers are small, and since the ring itself is black with blue numbers, I find it hard to read. The titanium models all seem to have dual color GMT chapter rings, which makes them a little easier to see, but I still feel this area is much too small. I would have preferred a standard GMT over the WorldTimer, but as I said, I'm not someone who is actually using these GMTs for any real world use, so if you are and you like and use GMT watches often, let me know your thoughts on the WorldTimer bezel and the small 24-hour chapter ring. And I have a few other things to point out about this dial, but let's start with the LumiCast indices. These are chunks of 3D plastic lume, and I think the first time I reviewed a watch with these numerals was Boulder, but other companies are using them as well. The lume is not applied or coated, but it's completely encased as part of the material, and I love the look, whether it's day or night, with how they jump off the dial. The dial itself is completely void of text beyond the logo, and this is the same across all Thresher Worldtimer models, and down at the 6 we have a date cutout. Now this may come across as extremely nitpicky, but on this example especially, the date is really hard to see, and I think a border or outline around the cutout would improve its visibility. With all that's going on with this dial, they may have went with the less is more approach to the date cutout, but I would have just preferred the 6 numeral in that case. And on to the marbled carbon fiber dial. Marble or shredded carbon fiber is nothing new, something that's also been used in pocket knife handles the last few years, as well as other applications, and we have seen dials and watch cases made out of this material as well. Every dial is going to have a different pattern, so each is unique, much like how the Damascus case is. And on this one, right around the date, you could see that there is just a void. It's just black in that area. This is more noticeable in the dark when it's all glowing, and this is probably just as example. Otherwise, it's a bluish, black, gray look about it, and you can see the blue streaks through it, and it kind of reminds me of navy camo, and I like that look a lot. Around the back, you could see the movement through the exhibition caseback, and no, I'm not going to complain about it, as even though these movements are rather plain from the factory, Zelos did upgrade this one with a black rotor that has a map engraving on it, and it looks pretty good. Now, one thing of note, though, the caseback says titanium on it. I'm not sure if the caseback is titanium or steel, but I'm assuming they are using the same casebacks from the titanium models and just didn't bother to make a one-off for the Damascus model. One thing that is not titanium on this model is the bracelet, because this one gets an all-new rubber strap. Now, I believe this is an all-new strap for Zelos, but maybe they have used it before and I missed it. They do release a lot of models, but either way, I love the look of this strap. It's fitted to the lugs perfectly, and in photos, it may look rigid or stiff, but this strap is anything but. It's extremely pliable and it's so great to wear on the wrist like most FKM straps are. And this one is even more comfortable as the strap is pretty thin at 2.2 millimeters. The strap also has a little dimension to it with the inset design, which I quite like, but the texture of the strap is a little different than I am used to. It's a matte texture, almost like a very, very fine pebble texture, and that texture unfortunately does allow this strap to collect a lot of dirt and dust, skin flakes, etc. Now the underside of the strap is finished like most FKM straps and doesn't get dirty like the front, and while it is easily blown or wiped off, it does kind of take away from the properties of FKM or natural rubber straps that don't attract lint or dirt like silicone. But it does feel wonderful on my 7.5-inch or 19.05 centimeter wrist. That I can't deny. This is a pleasure to wear with the thin, comfortable strap and the thin watch case. And lastly, we have the lume, and as you can see, everything is loomed up here. The numbers, the hands, the WorldTimer bezel, all those cities are loomed up, and this carbon dial is all loomed up as well. When it's fully charged, this damn thing is awesome and just looks amazing. But there are a few things to note. One, the carbon lume does not last very long at all. I mean, it starts fading out a few minutes really. So while those Lumicast numbers are going to be glowing for many, many hours, don't expect to see that funky pattern all through the night. And the 24 hours are not loomed, or if they are, against a marbled carbon fiber lume, I can't see them, or they're so lightly loomed as they're so small that it just fades out really quickly. As usual, Zelos has put out a really nice watch at a relatively affordable price. The titanium models are a good $200 cheaper, and they offer a lot of value for the money, and this Damascus Carbon Edition is just crazy in almost every way, and overall, it's a very solidly built and well-made watch. I would expect nothing less. I love the new case design and the bezel grip. I love the changes to the dial, and in general, I really like the overall look of this piece, but I do feel the Carbon Lumed Dial is a little gimmicky, especially if it fades so quickly, and I would like to see more prominent 24-hour numbers. If I want a GMT, I want a watch I can quickly look at and see 2 time zones, and this one in particular isn't as easy to do so, especially compared to the titanium models. If you like the look though and are less concerned about using the GMT and just want something really cool and funky, well, I can't blame you for choosing this Damascus model. There will be a written review with a lot of photos and of course more info on the Zelos website, both of those linked in the description below. If you like this video and you want to see more and help out the channel, just hit that like button, comment on this video, and consider subscribing and turning on notifications. This is the best way to support the channel. This is Don Evans from Watch Report. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.